Oh boy, I really want a new show to binge because I'm so bored. Let's go to Netflix and see what they have. Oh, what's this? A Norwegian show centered around Nordic mythology but set in the modern time? That sounds so cool! I love Nordic mythology! Dear God, what did I watch? Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I got here. Well, it all started when I discovered the show RAGNARÖK, a Norwegian Netflix show about a guy who awakens his divinity as Thor after moving back to his hometown. And if you couldn't tell by the name and location this takes place in, it's about Nordic mythology, which happens to interest me for no reason in particular. Now, I was thoroughly disappointed by this show, and I'm gonna tell you exactly why. And to deter the people who wanna say, do it better yourself then, I will do my best to rewrite this show. But for you to understand why the changes I make are better, I need to explain to you why it was such a disappointment in the first place. Spoiler warning, if you care. Since I basically already gave a plot summary, let's move straight into the characters. You have our protagonist Magne, professional social outcast as you can tell by his hairstyle. He is moving back into his hometown Edda together with his brother Lauritz and mother Turid. I'm only mentioning their mother's name because in case I mention her in this video, I don't want to have to re-explain that it's her mom because you forgot they had one. Their show certainly does at times though. The reason why they moved is because Turid got a job at the Norwegian megacorporation Jutul Industries, run by a family called the Jutuls. Jutul is an Old Norse word for giant, which are the enemies of the gods in mythology. This is a more modern interpretation of the giants though, as there are plenty of times in mythology where gods and giants marry or have children. But that's not important here. Essentially, these are the story's antagonists. The Jutuls consist of Vidar, Ran, Fjord and Saxa. I don't know how to naturally fit this into the script, so now you know. The only other characters I really need to name are the Volva, Wotan and Isolde. The Volva and Wotan serve the exact same purpose as the Mentor, just at different points in the story. Wotan just takes on the mantle as Odin when the Volva dies. I did give you a spoiler warning, don't blame me. As for Isolde, she's the reason the story really begins. She starts off as Magnus' only friend, only to die in the first episode after going on a trip to the mountains. Mountains owned by the Jutuls. And yeah, we have all the right to believe that Isolde was killed by Vidar. At least before it's just straight up told to us in the next episode. They were both on the mountains at the same time, and the last we see of Isolde alive, she seemed to have found something she wasn't supposed to. Not to mention that when Magne finds her, Vidar just happens to be driving by to check on what's happening. Magne obviously doesn't know that he killed her, but seeing as Isolde was outspokenly against the Jutuls, publicly accusing them of pollution, and the investigation into her death is being suppressed and ignored by the police, it's pretty much assumed. You know, that first part was strictly supposed to be about the characters, but I ended up on a tangent. Look, the first season was great. It seemed that the creators really cared about incorporating Norse mythology into the story. Anything you know about it will be brought up at some point or be hinted at. They knew how to get you hooked and how to make interesting characters. I think the relationship between the gods and the giants are set up clearly. In season 2, things start to buckle a bit, but so far it's almost not noticeable. Almost. We get introduced to new gods, Iman, who represents the goddess of love and fertility, Freya, and Henry, who represents the god of war, Tyr. Lauritz also awakens to his role as Loki, by shooting up Wotan's blood into his bloodstream like he's the protagonist of a really fucked up hentai. This season is mostly full of fluff, and because of all that fluff, I get to talk about my least favorite character, Fjord. So Fjord is one of the Jutuls, a bad guy. And he will settle into being a bad guy, right when we thought he had settled into being a good guy. So context, right? This is Gry, the second person to ever befriend Magne and Fjord's mutual crush. Gry's father is very sick due to working at Jutul Industries, and he can't get paid out by his insurance because, well, you tried to make a claim against a mega corporation. This makes Fjord question if he's been fighting the wrong battle this entire time. I mean, the love of his life is struggling because of the harm that his family has caused. This leads Fjord to try to be better, like helping Magne prove that Jutul Industries are in fact polluting the environment, after Magne has already been deemed schizophrenic by authorities. He even helps out in the protest against them. In the end, he fights with his family and says he's done and will run away with Gry, since she's already moving away from Edda due to her dad's illness. And that seems like the perfect way to end this character. He's changed for the better, and we get a glimpse into the idea that Ragnarök doesn't have to end in bloodshed. And then Vidar dies, so never mind, now Fjord reverts on everything he's ever said, abandons Gree, and tries to cover up the pollution. I'm sorry, what? Just to make sure we're on the same page here. Fjord goes out of his way to help Magne because he feels bad about the damage his family has caused towards the woman he loves, only to then go back on that and do everything he felt bad about doing. All in the same season. I hate this kind of character assassination so much. What was the point of it all if it doesn't amount to any significant change? Why couldn't you just let him move on and go with separate— oh right, he's attractive. Forget everything I said, he's clearly too vital to the plot. Okay, so fluff aside, what actually happens in this season? Like I mentioned before, Vidar dies. He is accidentally killed by Magne trying to protect his brother Lauritz. This causes a bit of a rift between the brothers, since Lauritz believed it to be an intentional kill. I should probably mention that the reason Lauritz was even with Vidar is because we find out he might be the product of an affair between Vidar and Turid. So he's trying to get to know his real dad. This leads me into talking about another issue I have with characterization, that being Lauritz. So Loki is very famously known as the trickster god. He's playing 4D chess while all the other gods, giants and dwarves are playing checkers. If you trick him, expect a pipe bomb in your mailbox the next day. I expect that to translate into a character that will help whichever side currently benefits him the most while getting the best deal out of it. And we sort of get that. Lauritz does hop between whose side he's on and generally does as he pleases. And in the beginning of the show he behaved like a complete asshole. Perfectly characterized as an opposite to Magnus' good nature. But most of the time it felt like he's the one getting tricked or manipulated. He doesn't believe that Vidar would try to kill him because his dad would never, even though he should know better than anyone that neither side has a reason to keep him alive. He's tricked by Magne into giving him the key to Utul Industries, which he got by tricking Vidar into believing he's loyal to the Utuls. And that's just some of the things I remember from the top of my head. He is not a 3 steps ahead kind of character, he's a 1 step behind kind of character. And that's when he's a character at all. By season 3 he is nothing more than an extension of the Midgård serpent, which itself turns out to be a nothing burger, so he is just nothing by season 3. Yeah, just like Loki in mythology, Lauritz gives birth to the Midgård serpent, which comes out of nowhere. He just suddenly mentions that he has a tapeworm, and I guess that was a hint rather than being a weird way to flirt with his crush. But all in all, the worst part is not the character assassinations or undeveloped plot points. It's the ending. Yes, you might like what the show has to offer so far, but what if I told you that everything I've told you so far was merely the results of Magnus' vivid imagination? Yeah, none of it was real. Now, while some of you are picking your jaws off the floor, the rest of you might be asking, but wait a moment, what about the people who died? What about all those scenes that don't involve Magne? To which I say, I don't know. Supposedly, Vidar died from a heart attack? There's no explanation for the vulva, but I'm guessing she died of old age or something. Isolde's death is real, however, confirmed by the director. And yeah, for everything else, I guess Magne was just laying in bed kicking his feet as he imagined some random kid getting shot in the head with an arrow, Wotan smoking weed, and his brother getting pregnant and having a C-section. But maybe you think all of this was foreshadowed, that the weird inconsistencies make sense in hindsight now that we know that none of it was real, and I'm just being disingenuous. And that has got to be some of the worst cope ever. This episode is the worst rated episode of the show. I could not find a single comment on previous episodes that remotely discussed the possibility that it's not real. So no, it was not foreshadowed. It was just thrown in the last episode like, yeah, you were always so obsessed with Thor, Magne. Everyone was expecting a proper showdown, like the title would suggest. But no, instead we got, in the end when Magne fantasies Thor dies, he is set free. He has now matured in the real world, and he is finally ready to feel real love. Not as a child, but as a young man. It is his personal Ragnarök. The old world has to die, so a new world can emerge. Yeah, okay dude, I got straight A's in English too. So allow me to rewrite this story the best I can. I will be removing characters if I think it's necessary, but I won't add any characters. All of this is done with a mixture of recontextualizing scenes from the show and my own art to fill in the gaps. First things first, we remove the vulva. She and Wotan serve the exact same purpose, and I don't think that makes any sense. Wotan is an infinitely more interesting character representing the god Odin, which is cool, and the other is just a Norse witch. I also think it would be a more interesting subplot to watch the Jotuns try to kill Wotan compared to how interesting it was watching them kill the Völva. The reason why is that Wotan lives in a specialized housing. He is always surrounded by people or caretakers, including Iman who works there. Getting him isolated long enough to kill him can lead to a lot of tension and humor, especially if Wotan is aware of what they're trying to do, which he would be since he's Odin. But I'm not removing the role of Völva completely. Instead, I'll be giving it to Isolde. She doesn't have to be aware that she's a Völva while she's alive, but it will make her more important to the plot in a way I feel like she should have been. She's the voiceover in some of the episodes, and she literally shows up in Magnus' visions and tells him she'll always be there. If that's not Völva behavior, then I don't know what is. It would also give a logical explanation as to why she's seemingly the only person in town that's calling out Jotul for their pollution. Because the Jotuns have been doing their thing for hundreds of years, it would make sense for them to, in a way, have the town brainwashed under some form of spell from the old world. But because Isolde is a witch, she is immune to this spell and can call them out anyways. This would also explain why she's treated as an outcast for her activism. It also gives Vidar a second motivation to kill Isolde on the mountains. Not only did she find the secret cave where Jotul stores dangerous chemicals polluting the waterways, but Vidar also suspects that she could be a Völva for the previously mentioned reasons and wants her gone. His conversation with Ran, where he admits to killing her, would not outright state that she's a Völva, but hint to his suspicions. We'll get it confirmed later. All in all, the first 3 episodes will play out pretty much exactly the same. Just remove the scenes with the Völva for now, I suppose. Episode 4 is when I want to introduce Iman. Her introduction in episode 3 can be removed without any major changes because she's not important until season 2. So I want to change her introduction a bit. Instead of being introduced as a transfer student, I want her to be introduced as a practicing nurse that will accompany them on their mountain field trip. Basically, she'll be there to teach them about first aid and what to do in an emergency. It bothered me a lot that she was introduced as a student, but we almost never see her in school. Hell, in season 3 she's suddenly an actress despite being in the same grade as Magne, so I think it makes more sense to make her older. And being a nurse obviously ties back into her representing the goddess of fertility. Otherwise, the episode plays out the same. Erik, Isolde's dad and their homeroom teacher, still wanders off on his own to think and finds Isolde's phone. And Vidar and Magne confirm their status as enemies. Vidar tries to send his dog to kill him, leading to Magne killing the dog instead. But he doesn't come out of it unscathed. He gets a pretty nasty dog bite and Iman comes to his rescue and cleans the wound. She then announces that she'll take Magne to the hospital. On the way to the hospital, Iman drops hints that she's also a god. First saying tame stuff like, "I can't believe this happened," to, "You really should report that, don't worry, I'll support you," to, "You're not in this fight alone." The episode ending when she's dropped him off and driven away. The last 2 episodes of the season also play out pretty much the same. The changes I would make is this. Magne gets back from the hospital, luckily not needing to sue because of his healing ability. He's greeted by a very concerned Turid, who just heard from the school that Magne killed Vidar's dog. She can't believe that Magne acted in self-defense of the attack. She works at Jotul Industries and has no reason to believe that such a kind man like Vidar, who may or may not be Lauri's dad, would ever try to harm her children. Ran says the same thing, and as the school principal demands that Magne speaks more with the school psychiatrist and potentially do some psychiatric tests. At this point, both Lauritz and Gry are starting to become more aware of what's going on, since they're Magne's closest relations. Lauritz still makes fun of Ran at the National Day ceremony, while Fjord and Magne fight. However, Fjord doesn't actually want to kill Gry and instead just knocks her out. The idea is that he wants his family to think that he killed her, but he instead wants to take her home and run away when she gets better. However, all Magne heard was that Fjord was gonna kill Gry, so he runs off to intervene, causing the fight and Magne learning to control the lightning. Season 2 begins with Magne running up the mountains like before, but instead of meeting the Völva, he meets Isolde, who now reveals that she's a Völva and has been watching over Magne since she died. She says the same thing the Völva did about meeting more new allies, but also says to seek out the old man for guidance because she can't always be there to talk to him. The old man being Wotan, who we haven't seen much of since the beginning. In the meantime, Fjord tells his family that he killed Gry and that he feels bad and refuses to partake in the fight anymore. This will be the last we see of him as he now officially runs away with Gry, who has no memory of what happened since she was knocked out. I felt like this made more sense since there's no reason for her to trust someone she knew tried to kill her. Magne meets with the man the same way in the original, but Wotan won't properly reveal himself yet. Magne is also let back into school after the accusation of Util Industries putting chemicals in the water that turned the freaking frogs gay is proven to be true. Episode 2 and 3 also play out mostly the same. I want Lauris to have his moment to shine, so I'm not gonna take that away from him. I would remove this scene though. I would rather say that Lauris is half giant because his father is one, rather than saying he's half god because he took Wotan's blood. Yes, I know that Odin and Loki engage in a blood bond thing in mythology, but the problem is that I'm not seeing a lot of bonding between these two to justify the blood theft. Just make them actually enter some form of bond so we can justify why Wotan goes from discarding Lauris to accepting him out of nowhere. All this father-son bonding will still end with Vidar trying to kill Lauris and Magne killing Vidar. This will cause a rift between the brothers. Not because Lauris won't believe that Vidar will try to kill him, but because he thinks no one should have to die even if it's accidental. This is a very ironic sentiment for Lauris to have, because Loki is pretty much the reason why Ragnarök begins. This will lead Magne to want to make up with Lauris in any way possible, such as praying his powers away during Vidar's funeral. Now for episode 4, I don't really know how to rewrite it. This is the Mpreg episode, okay? I don't want to talk about it. We just remove the part where Fjord comes back since he is officially removed from the show. I don't care if you have a thing for him, he is gone. Another difference I'm making is that Lauris releases the serpent into the lake immediately after taking it home. I want to give it more time to grow, basically. So again, we're gonna have to remove the parts where Fjord does his evil stuff, and instead I want to focus this episode on Saxa and Ran. Because the company policy states that only a son can inherit the company, Saxa has to work really hard to overturn this policy. Ran does not want to help her because she's still grieving and wants to focus her efforts on revenge. This will lead us to 2 subplots. Saxa is working with the business people to try to mitigate the damages the company will have to pay for their pollution, while still organizing a public speech to try to trick the people into thinking they're taking accountability. Remember how I said that the whole town seems to be under some form of spell that makes them ignorant to what Util Industries is doing? Well, because of this scandal, the spell is starting to falter, so Saxa needs to come up with a quick solution to try to stabilize it and regain control. The second subplot is Rand wanting revenge on Lauris and Magne. She has the same conversation with Lauris that she had before and still tries to break into their house at night to kill him, only to be stopped by Magne. Obviously, Magne doesn't have his powers right now, which causes Lauris to hate him a little less, understanding the sacrifice he made to remain friends with his brother. The episode ends with Magne meeting up with a man to console with her, where she tells him to follow her, taking her to the place she works at and officially introducing Magne to Wotan, who gives a bit of an exposition dump about the only way for him to regain his powers is to craft Mjolnir. It is a bit late to introduce Wotan now, but see it more as him introducing himself to Magne, since we already knew he was important since the beginning. So, final episode of the season. We get a quick recap on what they need to craft a hammer, including a dwarf. Luckily, one of Iman's co-workers is one, and so she uses her powers to manipulate him into helping. But to make the hammer, they have to break into Util Industries, where the eternal flame used to forge the hammer lies in the basement. This is dangerous, and so Wotan sets out to recruit someone who can fight. He comes across Henry, who works at the local gas station / mechanic shop, and recruits him as the god of war Tyr after Iman tests his strength. Yes, this is very late to introduce Henry compared to in the original, but I made this change for a reason. Henry has no use in the actual story either way, so removing him from the picture does not really change anything. This means that I can instead introduce him when he's actually going to be useful. But don't think that I'm introducing him out of nowhere. I want to make sure that he's in the background or even has some customer service interactions with other characters before, so the audience can get an idea of his character before he's recruited and then think, oh my god, I knew he was going to be important. So anyways, about the key. In the original show, Magne tricks Lauris into giving him the key that he got from Saxa. We're changing this up. Instead, Lauris got the key from Vidar back in episode 2 as a family token. A key none of the other Utils know he has. Magne does know that Lauris has this key, however, because he showed it off to him when he got it. But now he has more bittersweet feelings about owning it since Vidar ended up dying and the other Utils despise him for it. So when Magne asks if he can borrow the key and explains truthfully that he needs it to get his power back in case Ran comes back, Lauritz happily gives it to him with a stick-it-to-him attitude. Now the brothers have officially made up. After this, the rest of the episode plays out the same. They break into Util Industries and forge the hammer. But Magne is not with the rest of them. He's breaking into Util and playing as a distraction, since he's the one who said they want on the stick the most. But he only sees Saxa, and they talk. Saxa explains that they were really stupid thinking they could break into such a private area with cameras everywhere, and that Ran is on their way to stop them, still thirsty for revenge. Magne will not have time to run back and help them, since she's gonna keep him there as long as possible. Now I get to write something fun. So remember the spell that Utils have over the town? I'm deciding to make Season 3 make more sense, Saxa uses this spell on Magne, making him infatuated with her. They can still have that scene where they make out, but Magne breaks away, thinking the spell was ineffective on him, and he runs off to help his team. The team in the meantime are fighting Ran, while Wotan and the dwarf forge Mjolnir. Magne makes it back right when Ran manages to cut off Henry's hand, forcing everyone to retreat. But they still manage to make it out with the hammer as Magne lands a surprise attack on Ran, making her slightly disoriented, only to be followed by a bitch slap from Iman so hard it knocks her down. Is this overtly silly? Yes, but that's why I'm including it. A consequence of all of this though is that the Utils now know of Wotan's existence, putting him in danger. Magne makes it to the mountains while everyone else takes Henry to the hospital, and he uses the hammer to call his powers back. Ending Season 2 almost the same way we ended Season 1. You might have noticed how I haven't mentioned Signy so far. Yeah, I'm removing her from the show completely. She's not important. So I want Season 3 to start off the morning after where Season 2 ended. Magne and Lauritz talk in school about the making of the hammer before being interrupted by Saxa, who says, "I decided not to report a break-in. You're lucky the company doesn't want any more bad publicity right now." Lauritz comments on her arrogance, but Magne isn't listening. He's still under her spell. I want the focus for these upcoming episodes to be on Turid and Erik. Magne and Lauritz are helping their mom organize the wedding, and as they do, she tells them stories. Not just about the day she's been on with Erik, explaining where she's been while things have been going down, but also stories about their father and living in Edda when the boys were young. She explains their father once worked at Util Industries, but they ended up having to move away because he suddenly got very sick. You might think that this sounds very similar to Gree's story, and that's because it is. I wanted to give a quick callback to her, while also showing the long-term damage the Utils have caused. Episode 2 is getting a bit of an overhaul. While Lauritz is still helping Turid and Erik plan their wedding, Magne is skipping out and instead hanging out with Saxa, who has him wrapped around her finger. Iman and Henry confront him when they see the two hanging out, but Magne brushes them off arrogantly. Sensing that something is wrong, they go to Wotan and ask for advice, who says that it's possible that Magne is under a spell. Unfortunately, it's too strong for Iman's power to overwrite it. They'll need the help of a vulva to break it. The episode will still end with Magne and Saxa showing up slightly late to the wedding, confirming the other gods' suspicions about the spell. While this scene can still be dramatically shot, I don't want attention to be taken away from the married couple, since this will be the last we see of them for the season now that they're going on a honeymoon. We can assume that the focus is coming from the perspective of Iman, Henry and Lauritz rather than the whole room stopping to see Magne walk in with a woman that isn't his girlfriend. As far as everyone but these three are aware, they probably are dating and would not care if he showed up a little late. So instead of it turning out to have been Fjord that's been feeding the Midgård serpent, it turns out to be Ran, who's just been silencing any missing person reports with her money and influence. Still, Saxa is the one who takes Magne on the boat trip, and the same situation plays out like in the original. However, we're starting to see some cracks in Saxa. She's starting to doubt if she's really just stringing Magne along for the sake of furthering their plans, or if she's generally starting to develop feelings. Ran also notices her insecurities, and they have a fight after the serpent situation about whose side she's on and if Ran is really in the right over her endless pursuit for revenge. Episode 4 also plays out roughly the same. Magne asks the other gods to help him retrieve his hammer, and they do. But I wanted to change something. In the Marvel universe, only 4 can carry Mjolnir. This isn't really a thing in actual mythology, but I wanted to keep something similar in the show. Instead of Magne being the only person able to pick it up, I want to change it to anyone with a strong mind can pick it up. The other gods can retrieve it for him, they have clear motivations and strong minds. But because Magne is under a spell, he can no longer pick up the hammer since his mind is clouded and distorted. Realizing this in front of the other gods, he runs away out of embarrassment. I also want to introduce Jens as Balder in this episode. I would justify it as the gods needing the extra help to find the serpent. Yes, instead of them stealing it back from Fjord, I want them to actually battle the serpent. We also need a reason as to why Lauris would be okay with them attacking his child, so saying his boyfriend could die otherwise would give Lauris a good enough reason not to intervene, as in mythology, Loki is the cause of Balder's death. They aren't going to kill the serpent, just make it throw up or something. And Balder is important as his death starts at the beginning of Ragnarök. At least I introduced him earlier than the actual show does. Episode 5, almost there. Wotan still believes in Magne and wants to break the spell, so he sends his crows to find out where he is. Turns out Magne has run back to the mountains, going through a complete mental breakdown, not understanding what's happening to him. We get to see a little through his perspective now and how the spell has affected him. He starts hallucinating Saxa, who whispers sweet little nothings like, "Why did you run up here again? You could have talked to me, you know. I'm always by your side. I love you. Do you still believe that?" This seems to calm Magne for a while. Allured by his visions, Saxa steps off a cliff, encouraging Magne to come closer. Right when he's about to step off, Isolde steps in and takes him to her realm. She desperately tries to break through to him. She shows him the past times when they hung out together and what he went through when she died. She shows him what the people he cares about are doing right now, worrying about his well-being. And last, she shows him a glimpse into Ragnarök. You said you didn't want to kill anyone again, but look at what the future has in store if we continue on this path. Ragnarök doesn't have to end the world, it could be the end of an era. Remember that I'm always watching over you. I know that you'll make the right decision in the end. Isolde disappears and Magne is back in reality, having fully broken out of his spell. Behind him sits Wotan with the hammer in his lap. Don't ask me how Wotan got up the mountain, he's Odin. He hands over the hammer to Magne, who successfully picks it up. It is now time for the series finale. We start off back at school. Saxa tries to lure in Magne again with fake concerns about the boat trip, but Magne kindly lets her know that she can no longer manipulate him. Unsure of what to do now, she and Ran have an emergency meeting about the next step. The gods are also planning on what to do next. Magne relays the message she got from Isolde that Ragnarök doesn't have to be the world ending. They all reluctantly agree and instead try to work towards convincing the giants to make peace. Ran and Saxa, however, cannot stop fighting. Ran wants revenge and Saxa no longer wants to fight because she's in love with Magne. Still, Ran is the older one and gets her will through. Planning montage. Yeah, okay, I just didn't know how to transition to the end. At this point, the series ends exactly how episode 5 ends originally. They meet up for the final showdown, but instead everyone agrees to enter an era of peace. No one else has to die. Let Ragnarök be the end of the war, not the world. As everyone puts their weapons down, the Midgård serpent bites its own tail. If you saw episode 5, you would know just how strange it was for this episode to end like it was the series finale when there was still one more episode. And I am not fucking keeping the all-in-the-head ending that we got. Instead, I'm just stretching out what happens in episode 5 and 6 so that the season can still have 6 episodes while having a satisfying conclusion. You could absolutely make an argument about filling out 50-minute long episodes, but let's be honest, the episodes don't need to be that long. If you cut out all the unnecessary fluff and focus more on developing plot points, then I think episodes can easily be halved while still keeping all the important stuff. Is this a perfect rewrite? No, but I do think it's better than what we got. Unless I state otherwise, or my timeline of event contradicts it, assume that things still progress the same way as in the original. As in, Magne is still doing a group project with Gry, and he still does all the things he does to investigate Isolde's death and Jutol Industries, leading to his suspension. There's still an uproar about the pollution, but instead of Signy being like a spokesperson for their new activism group, it's a town-wide uproar. Iman and Henry can still have their moments of abusing their powers, etc. Is this version super faithful to mythology? No, but the original story wasn't very consistent in their faithfulness either, so I wanna play around with it too. For example, while Ragnarök is signified by the Midgård serpent releasing its tail, since we never see it biting it at all, I'm switching it up. It could also have a double meaning of the world being at peace while it's biting its tail, but that the Ragnarök we know and love can still happen in the future if it were to release it. So is this the worst Norwegian show ever? In my opinion, yes, but this is also the only Norwegian show I watched. I also could barely see anything on my screen when watching this, so who knows if my video is even accurate. Seriously, this show is so visually dark, I needed to max out my brightness to see anything. If you think the backgrounds I made for this look really green, that's on purpose. But something this show has been compared to a lot is the Norwegian teen drama Skam. I never watched this since it's not my cup of tea, but 3 of the main casts are previous actors from Skam. And you can tell that the creators were really trying to bank on that. Take a shot every time Fjord makes a Zoolander expression and it might kill you. Yes, the creators might tell you that they aren't trying to make a new Skam, but you don't get this many Skam actors to play another teen drama, but this time disguised as a fantasy, for no reason. And about the climate activism part, honestly, this show could do without it. It's the most cookie-cutter inclusion ever. It is not breaking the mold or even tackling the subject in any new or thought-provoking ways. It's just pollution bad guys, big company pollute world, young people say world. On the topic of the activism though, I am insulted at how badly they handled Isolde's character. All of her work is equated to Magne, as if he's the reason people started disliking Util Industries. And to an extent, yes he is, but Isolde is the one with the YouTube channel. She's the one that made yearly trips to the mountains just to measure the glaciers and test the waters. Isolde is the one who made all the documentation that Magne needed, none of which are ever acknowledged by other characters because she stopped being useful to the plot the moment she died. The worst part of the show's activism is the fact that Util Industries are never convicted of anything. Fjord just goes on a press conference and talks about, if you don't drop the charges, we'll move our factories to Asia and that will be really bad for the Norwegian workforce. And the government just lets them go. Hey kids, you should do your part in keeping the climate clean, because the government would just sweep pollution corporations do on a daily basis under the rug, so it's all up to you now. Is this a realistic message? Yeah, but is it a good one? No. Also, can we talk about how weird it is for the show to imply that Magne's schizophrenia diagnosis was real? But then the director goes on to say that Magne just needed to grow up from his fantasies. What the fuck? Also, this show is weirdly sexual for supposedly not being a drama series. Look, explicit themes in Nordic media isn't uncommon. Famous Swedish example is probably Jalla Jalla or Adam och Eva, which have very explicit scenes in them. Though in those movies' defense, they're dramatic comedies about relationships like arranged marriages or finding the one. Point is, I don't mind it despite being a bit of a puritan sometimes. But this show overdoes it to a borderline fetishistic level. Just to list some of the explicit or unnecessarily explicit things that happens in this show. Ran has sex with 2 students during a school party. Fjord and Gry have sex. It isn't shown, but it becomes a serious plot point in the story. Vidar fingers Ran while she's bathing in milk. The overdrawn Empreg scene. Jens makes out with another guy on the clock. I'm pretty sure this is only included to manifest a subplot for Lauris, as if we had to be told that Jens was gay. Iman and Henry make out at the burger joint. Also, did the writers forget that Iman is in high school? Magne and Saxa make out in this weird fever dream. There's a lot of scenes with these two actually. I guess someone read up on the lore. Iman uses her powers to make out with Ran and raise her grades. Actually, I think they do more than make out, but I don't want to think about the implications of that. And lastly, Saxa is bound and treated like a slave at home for giving Lauris the key. And with the added context that all of this is supposedly just in Magne's head, yeah. I don't like this show. Or rather, I don't like what it turned out to be. I didn't expect to be on the same level of production as a Marvel movie, no. But I expected more to happen when your source material is so heavily documented, yet also perfectly fine to interpret in new ways. Episodes are 40 minutes long, leaving a lot of potential to set things up or resolve conflicts, but instead it's mostly fluff. Anyways, music credits and social media is linked in the description, as well as whatever interviews and reviews I read for this video. I'll see you guys next year.